Welcome to the SPE Podcast, powered by the Society of Petroleum Engineers. You're listening to the SPE Live Technical Director Series, shared challenges and technologies for maximizing the value and life of completions. The audio from this episode was previously recorded on May 15th, 2023. And now your moderator, Bob Pearson.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to this SPE Live Technical Directors Series on the shared completions and production challenges and the technologies for maximizing the value and life of completions. My name is Bob Pearson. I'm an independent petroleum engineering consultant and a former technical director. I'll be your moderator and representative in the discussions today. The session will last about 30 minutes, and we encourage you to post your questions into the chat during the program. It's now my pleasure to introduce Karen Olson, the current TD for completions. She is a senior completions advisor with Well Data Labs, as well as being an independent consultant. She was previously the technology director for Southwestern Energy and has worked in completions and reservoir engineering for more than 37 years. She started her career as a fracturing engineer with the Western Company and then went on to work with Holditch & Associates, Mobil and BP before joining Southwest Energy. The other panelist is Hamid Al-Mari, the current TD for production and facilities. He's been an active SPE member for nearly 20 years. Hamid began his career as an apprentice with Chevron before joining Saudi Aramco in 1991. He's presently the Production and Facilities Development Director for Saudi Aramco. Over the last 30 years, Hamid has worked in production, reservoir management, drilling, and facilities. Karen and Hamid, welcome to the SPE Live.
Oh, thank you, Bob. It's good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to see you a lot, too.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Natalie, behind the scene. And glad to be with Karen and all the listeners today and SPE members. Thank you.
So I'd like to start off today's discussion with a couple of questions about re-stimulations. Hamid, can you kick us off about talking about candidate selection or maybe even deselecting high-risk candidates?
Okay, thank you, Bob. I would like to start first with the objective of the stimulation of the frac cells, mainly to boost the production by increasing the reservoir contact either by the new entry points, new perfs, or rely on the frac reorientation to the existing perf or ports, enhance the frac conductivity, placing the proppant in previously unpropped fractures, or energizing the natural frac fissures. Now, in order to identify the good candidates, they have to have a certain characteristics that will encourage the designers to go and pick them up. Now, long spacing between the stages of previous frac, the rule of thumb is to be more than 300 feet in between. The initial frac of low performance due either to frac fluid or inadequate prop volume or natural frac presence nearby. Also underperforming wells when you compare it to the offset wells, and sometimes for low because of low operational risk. Now, if we look to the other sides, the bad candidates, how we can identify the bad candidates or the high-risk candidates, we'll find that usually they're the ones in depleted or limited or low-pressured reservoir, the ones that they have had throughout the development of the fields or the placement of the well integrity issues due to corrosion, erosion, casing deformation, or issues with the cement integrity, which usually it will include risking the refrac by casing damage. Also, you need to look to the production decline in the offset wells and can give you a good indication of the bad candidates before you pick them. Nearby water contact is also one of the sign, especially if you have this information, whether your refracking gas wells or an oil wells.
Karen, can I maybe pass it across to you as how you see it as a fracturing specialist, how you view refracturing?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Well, I think Hamad, he covered so many items that I've, fully agree with. I would probably emphasize, and the one things I'd emphasize is looking for old completion styles. So wells that were completed years ago, and my background for the last 10 plus years has been unconventional. So I'm going to be primarily thinking in my mind, long horizontal wells with multi-stage fracs in them. And if you just go back a few years, a lot of the clusters were spaced, 30, 50, say around 50 feet between each other. And currently, most companies are fracking in the 15, maybe up to 30 feet at most. And so you're looking for those wide cluster spacing, old completion designs. And then also, like, Hamad said, you want to look to see how did the well perform compared to other wells around it. It could also be used, maybe they used a different frac fluid. Maybe if you go back far enough, maybe they're using still crosslink or, thicker fluids versus the slick water to look at. For the wells to be careful of, the one big thing you got to be careful of, and, at least for refracs, is being able to re-enter these horizontals. And so one of the things you should do is go and look at their original treating pressures. Make sure you don't see were there any plug slippage or casing deformation signs. Maybe when they drill the plugs out, where they had some sticking points or something like that. So you just want to be careful. I know in the last few years, I think it's gotten better, but we have had a bunch of casing deformation issues, a lot of plug issues where sand erosion around the plug has actually eaten the casing away. So we've had some well integrity issues. There's been a lot of refracs, I would say, in the Eagle Ford shale. And what seems to be working down there is people are literally just running a new liner in the lateral section and cementing it. So, for example, if the well was set up, that's the other thing is what's your casing size. If it was ran with, say, 5.5-inch casing, you can then go in and run a 4-inch liner and cement it in place. And they've had excellent success. I know both Devon and ConocoPhillips have done quite a few down there, and they're seeing huge uplifts. I mean, wells that are making, 10, 30 barrels a day, going up to over 1,000 barrels a day after they do these restimulations. So the economics, I think, are there for them if you set them up properly. So
yeah, thank you. That makes sense to me to maybe look at re-cementing a liner, and that brings me across to a sort of related issue on well integrity. One of the things that worries me with initial fracturing and refracturing is just the quality of the cement on the production liner. Hamid, do you want to comment on that?
I agree with you, Bob. During the frac, if we have an issue, now we need to go back to the cement quality during the drilling times. If we have now what could be a weak cement behind the casing, or as channels that were developed during the cement job during the drillings. Now, once we have frac operations, would lead to what could be a CCA, casing to casing analysis, which is normally it's hard to fix. Now, and this is one of the areas any drillers and that they will have to watch, especially if they know that this will be fracked, that they need to pay more attention to all the solutions from the cement type that they will be using, from the practices that they will exercise during the drilling time to ensure that they do not have an issue with the cement. And sometimes even if they anticipate that they might have an issue with the cement, is maybe to use a cement retainer in order to to enhance the cement quality behind the casing and to prevent what could be a breach into the cement and a damage that sometimes irreversible, and you could lose your well, if you frack it and you end up with the high CCA in the back sides of the well that could cause risk to the surrounding areas or nearby communities.
Yeah. Karen, I think that the Well Integrity Technical Section and the Fracturing Technical Section have all been doing quite a bit of work in this space. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, so there is a Well Integrity Technical Work Group, and they've been working really hard. They're actually putting together a database to try to identify, what are the key issues of causing these well integrity issues, where we're having casing deformation. This is something that Martin Rylance and George King and some others have been working on. They are having too a technical section or session at ATCE in San Antonio this year to talk about that specifically. So I think it would be good for everybody to listen to. They're also they're coming up with common terminology, something as simple as just, making sure everybody's on the same page when they're saying, casing deformation, what does that mean, for example. But, having a good cement job along the lateral is so critical when you're doing these horizontal wells. And you're going to be, if you're fracking and you're putting perforations every 15, 20 feet apart, you better have a good cement job. Otherwise, it's just sort of pointless in a way. Otherwise you'll create super fracks or reconnect with the previous stage. And now all of a sudden you got fracks going 2 pads away, for example, and draining parts of the reservoir that you don't want it to and leaving other parts undrained. So, there are some best practices that the Well Integrity Group have come up with, like reciprocating the casing and rotating it during the cement job. They found seems to work quite well. But yeah, well integrity is so important. And I've been looking at, for the last couple of years, thousands of stages during working for Well Data Labs and doing sealed wellbore pressure monitoring. And I will say, in the most part, the companies are getting so much better. Because I can tell if a well has a bad cement job, or if there's a near fault or something like that. But, just by how fast a frac comes in contact with that offset, sealed wellbore.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen as much as it used to. So I think the word's getting out and it's getting better, which is good.
Yeah, so a sort of related topic to this is looking at how we can utilize existing wellbores and existing facilities for carbon capture utilization or carbon capture and sequestration. I'd like to ask both of you about your thoughts on where the challenges lie, and maybe where we need some more R&D for that matter, as we move into something completely new. So, Hamid, maybe you can kick us off.
What we need to start with is how we want to look to the CCS completion first, since whether we want to develop a new structure or use an existing assets and repurpose them to for the sake of this carbon capture and storage objectives. Now we need first to ensure to go and check the reservoir characterizations. Now, for the fundamental capacity and the properties of the rock, the fluids, and potential interaction with the CO2, this one. Now, understanding its capacity to capture the CO2, then to verify the integrity of its sealing and confinement to prevent what could be an issue of leakage of the CO2s and the loss of your storage integrity. Now, this will help to anticipate the operating envelope itself by knowing the injection, the shut-in pressure, the temperature at both the surface and downhole. Now, knowing the fluid properties and the partial pressure of the CO2 and H2S will help also in the material selections for the completion itself. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand that sometimes simpler is better. And by minimize the completion components, the materials taken into account, and maybe if we have a completion of a carbon steel that can help. Now we've got to be careful. We've got to make sure that since now since the CCS business is picking up, we'll have to make sure that by designing the CCS wells and storage structure itself, we'll have to make sure that we increase the chance of success by doing everything to near perfection in order to prevent any incident at this stage that could stigmatize the CCS business. Now this will depend also. We'll have to be careful about the exposure by selecting the location, the fluid properties based on the selection to optimize the cost itself. Also, we want to make sure that we do not exceed the limits in terms of cost. One of the areas that we'll have to make sure, whether it's existing assets or new assets, we'll have to ensure that we equip the wells with monitoring means, be the HMS, temperature sensors, in order to fiber optics, if you would, surface and downhole. Mm-hmm. And if we can do even real-time data acquired to build the predictive models. Now, if in some new wells, maybe we can even lean to more strong metallurgies like the CRA or GRE materials as commonly used to minimize the corrosion, especially if we know that there is also H2S presence in the reservoir or in the fluid that we will be storing.
Thank you. Yeah, good overview of all the concerns. Karen, I don't know whether you can comment on this, but for those of us living and working overseas, it's a bit confusing looking at the US that the EPA has a different designation of Class 6 wells for CCS and Class 4 wells for CCUS. Could you comment on that a little bit, or is that outside your expertise?
I can comment on it a little bit, Bob. So, the EPA has what they call Class 6 for CCUS injection wells, which are very much more stringent than Class 4 in terms of you have to make sure that you can prove that you got, as Ahmad said, a seal to contain your CO2 in the horizon you're injecting it into. You have to be able to monitor the plume and show where it's going. And so there's been field trials going on where people are doing, seismic, multiple seismic to try to show can you imagine trying to figure out where the CO2 is moving in the subsurface, especially if you're in a carbonate? It's not homogeneous or anything like that. And then you have to monitor, as Ahmad said, temperatures and your casing pressures. And so it's very strict. One thing that I'd like to say, though, is, we've been, at least in the States, we haven't necessarily been doing CCUS, just to store CO2, but we have been doing CO2 EORs since the early 1990s successfully in existing oil fields. When I worked for Mobil out in the Permian, we were injecting for EOR purposes very successfully in the slaughter field, Salt Creek field. The thing you have to be careful, though, is you can build all these models you want, but you never can really capture the heterogeneity that you see. For example, I remember Salt Creek, all the modeling that was done ahead of time said we wouldn't see breakthrough to the first producer for 6 months. And so the facilities thought they had extra time to get all the facilities ready when we actually saw a breakthrough in 6 weeks. And it was just because, there may be those, stray stringers, and all of a sudden, CO2 being a gas, it's going to go where it wants to go. and it just zipped on across and, showed up. And we just had to, next thing you know, we're shutting in a bunch of producers because the facilities weren't ready. So I think we do need to come up with better monitoring and new technologies for these CCUS. Hamad mentioned fiber optics. I think fiber optics could be a good one. The other thing that I'm concerned about in existing fields is, you're going to do your best for all these new wells for your injection wells, but what if you have existing vertical wells all over the place? You better get a baseline across your whole field and monitor all these other existing well bores that could be across the field to make sure that you don't have any well integrity issues in those. That's my biggest concern in doing CCUS these days and in old fields. So
I think the the new P&A technical section is going to be doing some stuff together with the CCUS technical section around exactly that. How do we properly abandon the existing penetrations to allow CCS?
Yeah.
Anyway, if I could lead you to a couple of
our water zones on there.
Can I lead you back to fracturing for a minute? We've got a couple of interesting questions from the audience. Pierre-Edouard Vincent was asking about, in the primary cementing of long liners, what percentage of wells do you think use advanced slurry placement models to refine these practices?
That's a good question, and Pierre, I don't really know. I'd have to ask our drilling TD Robin on that one. I just know in my previous role as technical director at Southwestern Energy, we had just learned from best practices of reciprocating casing and rotating the casing string while we were cementing and making sure that we had returns, all the way, quite honestly, all the way back to surface. And whether, I don't think we ran any fancy software to do it, though. I don't know, Hamad, how about yourself over in the Kingdom? Yeah, are you aware of the drilling doing any fancy slurry software?
I know that it's exactly the same practices that you just highlighted, Karen, and we're doing the same, especially when we go to we need to simulate. We need to simulate of course the trajectories, especially when we know that there will be what could be a washout during the placements of the laterals, because if you do not plan well your laterals and you do the cementings, you might end up with weaker spots that during the fracking could cause a deformation of the lateral.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually just looking at a well exactly like that, as you say, Hamad. The tortuousness of the well path meant they couldn't rotate when they planned to, and so they ended up with a poorer cement job than they expected because they didn't have enough torque to be able to rotate the pipe.
Yeah, and some of the latest ideas for drilling is these U-shaped wells. And I don't know how that would impact the torque and being able to rotate the casing for these companies, which I think is a cool idea. Don't get me wrong. I actually have this vision of a U-shaped well with the second part of the U, the toe section of it being a slotted liner, and then fracking and hitting it. Fracking the first part of the U and hitting the slotted liner part of the U. So drilling's doesn't like me right now, but but those would be critical too on there. So it's a great question. Thanks for that, Pierre.
No, I've worked in a couple of U-shaped wells in conventional applications. It's great in some conventional applications, but indeed it really needs a fully integrated well engineering team. Which
what I've typically seen is models and everything will be run on maybe the first well when you go to do something new, like say all of a sudden you're going from 10,000 foot laterals to 15,000 foot laterals. They'll run some models, softwares to double check everything. And then if they successfully do it, then they don't run any models after that.
Yeah, and that maybe leads nicely to Pierre-Edouard's second question, which is relating to risk-based analysis and management for working in well engineering. Do you want to comment on that in a general sense, Hamid?
Now, let me mainly we need to understand now the risks of dealing with the CCS. Now, the objective of the CCS is to ensure that we maintain the confinement of the CO2 downhole for long life of the storage. So, and this should start, early during the design phase, and the selection of the structure itself to ensure that it's very well sealed. And when you to drill the wells, to drill the wells with all the accessories in the wells, that they will be very durable to live long throughout the life cycle of the fields. And now we'll have also to make sure that either during the operations at the surface or during the life of the wells, that there is no chance, even slim chance, of any well integrity in the wells that could lead to the seeping or the leakage of the CO2s to either shallower aquifers or even to behind the casing to the surface, to the extreme cases. So the selection of the completion methodology is very important for the durability of the wells. The location itself of the surface spot or the placement of the wells is very important to be far away in a very safe areas away from even the populated communities. So now we need to select the locations, the spot itself where we will place our wells. We need to ensure that we have a stringent design for the completion itself. It could be more expensive than the normal wells, but it's worth it because this will be long life investment for the CO2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the monitoring, of course. So even if it requires to go with intelligent, completions to keep monitoring the wells throughout the injections and the reservoir itself pressures, would be even a cherry on the cake.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of good questions here, but we're running out of time. So, Karen, do you want to maybe close out with just a quick comment on risk-based design, and then your closing thoughts, and we'll come back to Hamid for his closing thoughts.
Yeah,
maybe 2 minutes each.
Okay, thank you, Bob. So one of the things I learned when I was working in deep water, and you have these big, important projects that are new, and you don't necessarily know all the risks that could happen, is we would always do like a MARS or a major risk assessment, and we'd have a group of 10, 12 engineers, and we would just try to identify every risk that could occur, both short-term and long-term, and then what were the possible ways to reduce that risk or eliminate that risk. And the thing about it is, you have to address, anytime a risk would be brought out, you have to address it. You can't just let somebody say, oh, no, that's not a big deal. You have to come up with how are you going to address it. For example, somebody could say, oh, well, how are you going to prevent, CO2 coming up the backside of your casing? And we'd have to come up with at least two solutions to that risk. Or how are we going to prevent, I see somebody said, what are the legal liabilities on there it's like one of the best things from a legal perspective, and this is just my opinion on this, of course, is to get that baseline and understand what you're starting with. What's your starting point across the whole field? So that means collecting samples from any water wells, or having a water wells that you can monitor and get good solid baselines. And then you do your very best to make sure that you've set this up for success, as Hamad said, and success for the long term, not just to be able to prove that you can inject, CO2. In closing, I think we got a great industry. I love working in the oil field, and I think everybody, in their heart is trying to do their very best when it comes to, completing and producing these oil and gas wells. And then we're also leading into other, helping other technologies, the CCUS. We didn't touch on geothermal, but, geothermal is we're helping the geothermal group. For example, there's a Utah Forge out in Utah that we're helping, taking oil and gas technology to the geothermal group. Did you know that they never pump proppant when they frack a geothermal well? And here we are from oil and gas going, no, you got to pump proppant, something as simple as that. Yeah. I would like to also let everybody know that abstracts for the hydraulic fracturing conference is open right now. So now's your chance to write that abstract and submit it. And this is for the HFTC that's in the Woodlands every year in February. And then we also have an international hydraulic fracturing conference in Muscat, Oman, and it's coming up real soon in September 12th through the 14th, which I'll be there for that. And this will be our third year to hold it there. And it's a wonderful event. We have papers from all over the world being presented there. So it's a great one. And, there is a geothermal workshop in August down in Galveston. So anybody interested to see what we're doing from the oil and gas perspective for geothermal, that I'll be there for that one as well. So, Bob, thank you. And
thank you very much. Hamid, 2 minutes. We will take that liberty that they gave us of running over by 5 minutes. So 2 minutes for you, Hamid, to close it out.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Just I want to recap it quick. We talked about the stimulations, and this is one of the means to maximize the value of any operator's assets. We need to leverage the technologies that we have in hand in order to increase the chance of the success of the re-stimulations. We need also to get into the microseismic production log, do the BTAs, and utilize the tracers, new technologies, the fiber optics to help us maximize the value of our assets. We talked about the oil integrities. Also, we need always to make sure that both all the entities working on a designing of the wells to pay more attention to the cement operations to deliver the wells with the least chance of well integrities and loss on the operators and the investments. We talk about the CCS potential. We need to educate ourselves more and to ensure that we go with the designs today, since this is now worldwide. Will be one of the first batches of the CCS. We need to invest lavishly, if you would, in order to make sure that we reduce the chance of any failures to the minimum, in order not to lose the image of the industry. We have enough, and we have. And I encourage, of course, our colleagues in SPEs to take the advantage of all the technical sections that we have. It's in SPEs. Hydrogen. We have the hydrogen. We have the P&A, newly born technical sections with a lot of potential, and you know that. We have a lot of great topics that we're discussing in the MPA, and we need to capitalize on this experience. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Karen, for giving me the chance to be with you today and with the audiences. Back to you.
Thank you both for your time and your thoughts. Great session. We could go on for a long time, but unfortunately, we've only got 30 minutes. We overrun it by our 10%. So what can I say? Except thank you, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks for listening to the SPE Live podcast. For more content, visit the SPE Energy Stream, the industry's digital pulse, at streaming.spe.org. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe and review. Join us next time on the SPE Live podcast.